Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on Little's Law YouTube channel. So today we are on our day 6 of upskilling our performance testing and engineering skills. And I would like to thank everyone for your support and for your likes for the first 5 days of video. And I believe I would have shared a lot of knowledge to you on those first 5 days. So today we will see the day sixth, which is to identify the plan and the test. So which is going to be the planning and the designing of our test. So when it comes to planning and designing test, you are basically figuring out how to simulate the real world situations for your application. And this involves identifying the key scenarios. So, what is identifying the key scenarios? So, think about the different ways people will use your application, and these scenarios will help you understand what kind of performance you need to test, and that is the identification of key scenarios. And coming to the second point, which is the varying user behavior. So, users don't all behave the same way. We all know, even we use the application in a different manner comparing to the other person who is sitting next to us. So you need to mimic this variety in your tests to get accurate results. And coming to the test data, you'll need the test data to test with. So you have to make sure it is relevant and also it has to be diverse enough to reflect the real usage. So why do I mention diverse enough is if you're using the same data again and again, we all know what happens. The data or the request will not go to the server, instead, it will go to the cache, and automatically the response times will be biased, or you will not get the actual response time, which is supposed to be the actual response time, but rather it's a cache response time. So that's the reason we have to be very careful in generating the test data. So it has to be relevant, but it has to be diverse enough to reflect the real usage. And coming to the choosing metrics, we have to decide what data you need to measure during the tests. So this data will tell you how well your application is performing. Coming to the second part, when you design your test, your aim is to create simulations that mirror real life usage. I have told this in many of my videos. It's very important that we have to create our simulations or the emulation that should mirror the real life usage. And this way, you will get reliable data to help your organization make informed decisions. So, some important things to consider when identifying key scenarios are scenarios required by contracts or agreements. So, you have to go through the contract and agreement and make sure you are covering all the scenarios that must be part of your testing. And then some of the common usage scenarios. So when it comes to common usage scenarios, you have to make sure that you're covering all the common usage. Say, for example, the login page, the search page, or the pages that's been used commonly. And in fact, you can even use the analytics tool to find what are all the common used scenarios. And then the critical scenarios for business. So here I'm mentioning that it should be critical scenarios for the business, which means all through the application we have a lot of critical scenarios, but when it comes to business we have to be very particular about it. We have to be very sure that we are choosing the very critical scenarios that are required for the business. Say, for example, if a particular page which directly creates revenue to the business, say for example the add to cart or the payment page, so these pages should be very carefully taken care, because these are very critical scenarios for the business. And then the scenarios that put a lot of strain on performance. So what are the scenarios? Say, for example, if you have some database queries that hits the application and retrieves lots of data, which actually adds a lot of strain on the performance. So you have to be very particular. You have to be careful while you are dealing with those scenarios. So you have to first you have to add those scenarios, but again you have to you have to make sure that you are considering it as part of your key scenarios. And then the technical or the stakeholder concerns. So you have to discuss with the technical team and the stakeholders to make sure that you're covering or you're identifying or you're not losing any of the key scenarios. So in that case, you have to discuss with the technical or the stakeholder team and you have to identify the key scenarios. And then lastly, the highly visible scenarios that attract a lot of attention. Say, for example, if you are if you're testing an application which is throwing offers on a Black Friday, or a page which shows your clearances, or a page which gives the customer a lot of discounts. So those must be highly visible scenarios to the customers. So those pages also should be part of your key scenarios. So once you have identified these scenarios, you can focus on collecting metrics. So metrics are like the measurements that tell you how your application is doing compared to what you expect. They can also help you find problems or the bottlenecks in your application. And we all know what are all the metrics that we collect, like the response times, the throughput. Yes. So any metrics that will help you to find the problems or the bottlenecks in your application has to be part of your metrics, and that has to be measured while doing your testing. So it's a good idea to think about which metrics you need right from the start of your test design. And this way you can build them into your test easily. And when choosing the metrics, focus on specific characteristics you care about or indicators related to those characteristics, and this will help you gather the right kind of data for your test. So now let's move on to the part 3, the realistic design. So you have to make sure your tests reflect real world conditions, as I have told you already during the starting of the video, which includes factors like human behavior, network activity, and interactions with other systems. And you also have to avoid basing your design solely on theories or projections. And coming to the credible results, tests that mimic real world usage produce more trustworthy results, which are valuable for performance testing. And when it comes to component testing, don't forget to include tests at the component level because they are essential for realistic testing. And when it comes to cost and time, realistic test designs might take more resources to implement, but they provide more accurate insights for the business and stakeholders. And when it comes to avoiding extrapolation, you have to try to guess performance based on unrealistic tests, which can lead to big mistakes as the system grows. So it's better to invest in accurate testing upfront. And when it comes to collaboration, you have to work closely with developers and administrators to decide which metrics are important and how best to capture them in the tests. And finally, the tool influence. So we all know that there is an influence by the tool in your performance testing. So you have to be very cautious of letting your testing tools dictate your design. And it's better to design tests assuming they can be executed and then adjust if necessary rather than avoiding tests because of tool limitations. And then finally, the final part. So realistic test design should include user delays. So we know we all talked about think times a lot of time, multiple times. So mimic real user behavior by including delays and think times in your tests. And when it comes to user abandonment, account for the possibility that users might abandon tasks for variable reasons. And finally, the user error. So you have to consider common mistakes users might make during testing. So overall, In every point, we have discussed about recreating the real world situation or doing a realistic test. So that should be our primary focus, and we all should move towards that as our objective. So I think I have discussed all the points when it comes to designing your plan, designing your test plan and your test. So I believe this video will be very useful to you. So until I meet you in our next video, it's bye bye from Vasan Shinmugam and Little Slaw.